The land is very close to the Atlantic coast, and at high tide, seawater is allowed to flow into pools. The process of evaporation then begins, and salt is produced. Because the water in the pools is shallow, this ensures that the sun always heats the clay bed. This creates the perfect habitat for small crustaceans and plankton, which is an excellent source of food for birds. Over 20,000 birds come here every year. These are pied avocets. They feed by moving the upward turning bill from side to side to locate crustaceans and worms in the water and sediment. It's a technique that's unique to avocets. Like many of the other bird species at Gironde, they've come here to breed. The salt pans cover an area of 2,000 hectares, and the walls around the pools form a network of artificial islands. These are perfect nesting sites. These common terns are catching fish for their chicks. They're aggressive and noisy birds, and will attack any intruder on their patch of land. When nesting is finished and their young have fledged, common terns will fly a very long way to the western coast of Africa to overwinter. Black-winged stilts also nest here, and they too are noisy. They constantly call to warn other birds away and to reassure their chicks. Black-winged stilts, common terns and avocets are three of nearly 200 bird species that live on the Gironde salt marsh. For an artificial landscape, it's a remarkably rich habitat. Moving north to the Brittany coast near Roscoff, you'll discover the magnificent beach of Carema. It's a stunning landscape that extends along 7 kilometers of Atlantic-facing coast. The special part of this coastline is above the beach, behind the sand dunes. This is one of Europe's most important habitats for wild flowers. There are hundreds of different species. Pyramidal orchids with up to 50 tiny flowers. Beautiful marsh orchids. Also bee orchids with landing stages for insects that look like bees. And delicate marsh helleborines. Many different species of wild flowers are found here. These plants are in a protected area. They've been left to grow here for years, with little interference from man, farm animals or pesticides. And they're thriving on big areas of the beach meadows. It's a time capsule, showing the true nature of the Atlantic coast, if left alone. The Atlantic Ocean affects the climate in northwestern Europe in two main ways. Westerly winds constantly bring moisture from the sea, producing a wet climate. A strong current also travels in the ocean from North America to Europe. It's known as the Gulf Stream because it originates in the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf Stream carries warm water northwards up the east coast of America. It then crosses over to Europe near Newfoundland, forming a powerful North Atlantic current, which bathes the European coast with mild seas. A demonstration of its influence is found in the seas around the Channel Islands, off the coast of France. Between the two main islands, Guernsey and Jersey, you'll find Sark. Like the other Channel Islands, Sark is affected by a huge tidal flow, and the sea level here can drop up to 12 meters between high and low tides. As the sea rises or falls, the current can be incredibly strong and fast. This combination of strong currents and warm water from the Gulf Stream ensures that there's plenty of food material in the sea around the Channel Islands, especially for filter feeders. These are jewel anemones. The water conditions are ideal for these beautiful animals. The water is packed with morsels of food and plankton, which the anemones gather with their tentacles. These are sea fans. They look like a coral you'd expect to see in more tropical waters, but they're found here much further north because of the influence of the Gulf Stream. The most colourful fish you'll see around the Channel Islands and the seas next to France and Britain is the cuckoo wrasse. It's a territorial fish, and the male guards his patch of ocean attentively. He'll often have as many as 6 or more female fish within his territory and keeps other males away. Cuckoo wrasse also have an extraordinary ability to change sex. This is a female, and she can become a male if the need arises. If something happens to a male, an old female will take his place. She will change sex and colour, and then she, or rather he, will defend the territory. Because of their isolation, most islands develop some wildlife speciality. Jersey's curiosity lives on Saint Bernard Beach. It hides amongst the thick growth of gorse and grass. It's a green lizard. The male is stunning and has a light blue neck and a bright green body. The female is just as impressive, with cream stripes along her body. The green lizard is one of Europe's largest lizards and can grow up to 40 centimeters in length. After the ice melted at the end of the last ice age, and before the sea levels rose, Jersey was the last Channel island to be isolated by the sea. That's why the green lizard is found only here and mainland Europe, and not on any other Channel island or on the British Isles or Ireland. It didn't have enough time to colonize further west before the rising Atlantic flooded. Another island speciality is found on the island of Alderney, and it's active at night. It's a blonde hedgehog. Hedgehogs on mainland Europe are usually brown, but the Alderney population have a genetic makeup that gives them a blonde color. Hedgehogs became extinct on the island around the time of World War I. They were reintroduced around 50 years ago, and by chance, a large proportion of the released hedgehogs carried a white color in their genes. As a result, most of the hedgehogs on Alderney are white. The Channel Islands in northern France mark a boundary, where further north, the Atlantic coast becomes much cooler and wetter. It also marks a point where some wildlife species start their distribution range. Gannets are only found in the North Atlantic Ocean. 3,000 pairs nest on Les Étaques Rock next to Alderney. Apart from one nesting location, a short distance south in France, all other gannet colonies are found further north, particularly on the British Isles. Across the English Channel, in Cornwall, on the southwest coast of Britain, you'll find another species that prefers the North Atlantic coast. Female grey seals have come to shore to give birth to their young. They always choose stony beaches, which are remote and where humans cannot reach. They also look for large beaches, where a dry area can be found, even when the tide is in. Here's a young calf, tucked in on one of those areas. After about 5 weeks, the calves have to venture into the sea on their own. These older calves have lost their white fur that kept them warm on land, and are now able to enter the sea. They'll learn to fish alone, and most of them will survive. Once the females give birth, they're ready to mate again. Close to the shore, bulls are eagerly waiting for them. When the females return to the sea, the males immediately approach them and attempt to mate. Grey seals rarely live further south than Britain. They are true creatures of the North Atlantic and live on both sides of the ocean, both in North America and Northern Europe. Cornwall is the most southwesterly region of mainland Britain. It's a peninsula with dramatic, often inaccessible coastline. For centuries, the region was a mining area for tin, copper and arsenic. And old mine buildings are scattered along the coast. The cliffs, though perilous to people, are safe places for birds to roost and nest. This rock is a favored place for these shags. They're a common coastal bird and can dive up to 45 meters to catch fish. The wildlife along the English coast is typical of temperate northern Europe. The land above the cliffs is damp, not too wet, and reasonably warm. This whitethroat has just arrived from south of the Sahara to set up his territory on a patch of heath. He's declaring his spot with a scratchy song. It may not be a beautiful song, but it'll deter other males and attract a female to nest with him under the bush. Around 45 kilometers to the southwest of Cornwall, you'll find the Isles of Scilly. They're an archipelago of 5 large islands, surrounded by islets and rocky outcrops. Because the islands are far offshore, they're important stopping places for migrating birds. They're a place to land, rest and feed, before continuing on the next part of their journey.